Goodbye, Speed Duels.
This is the end of Yu-Gi-Oh! Speed Duels.
It truly is wild to think that Speed Duels are actually coming to an end. And the main reason why is that Speed Duels as a whole was a format which I believe had a ton of potential, especially for players who didn't want to play the current TCG and much rather have like a more relaxed version of Yu-Gi-Oh! Speed Duels as a whole had a lot going on for them. The duels were simple, yet engaging. The cards were very affordable, yet very high quality. And best of all, they embraced the anime and made decks that could never see the light of day actually viable. Nevertheless, even though I believe that Speed Duels are great and had a ton of potential, I still do believe that this was inevitable, given the blatant neglect Konami demonstrated towards Speed Duels. And that's exactly what we're here to discuss in today's video. The ways that Konami failed Speed Duels as a whole, and pretty much let it die. But before we get started, I do ask that if you do end up enjoying today's video, then I would really appreciate if you could do me a huge favor and subscribe to the channel. I am trying to get this channel to 500 subscribers by the end of the year, and I can't do it without your help. Without further ado, thank you very much, and let's get right into it. So, I believe that the first great contributor that led to the downfall of Speed Duels as a whole was the product. Don't get me wrong, the modern day product that we get for Speed Duels is genuinely some of the best product Yu-Gi-Oh! Has ever released, and I'm not even joking. However, I am more referring to the beginning of Speed Duels. For a good while between January of 2019 and May of 2020, Speed Duels had released a ton of product, from booster boxes to starter decks, and needless to say, that product was, well, a huge flop. And that's an understatement to say the least. I genuinely don't understand what Konami was thinking with this move. Releasing booster boxes for Speed Duels is borderline ludicrous, especially given the very poor design these packs had. Having each pack contain only 4 cards and not even guaranteeing a holo is just absolutely insane and completely out of touch with Konami. But honestly, we could almost ignore how badly these packs were constructed if it weren't for the quality of cards being printed in each of these packs. Don't get me wrong, it makes sense why Konami would print the cards they did in each of those packs. However, it feels incredibly tone deaf of them expecting people to pay roughly a similar price to a regular booster pack which guarantees a holo and at that gives them new cards in addition. And then you compare that to a Speed Duel pack which had none of that. No holo guaranteed, and at that, they give you cards that belong in a shoebox in your bulk pile. Needless to say, the booster boxes were a huge miss, and remarkable how Konami tried to do them over and over and over again, hoping that they would work. However, I will say this, the more Konami released these booster boxes, the better they got. But nevertheless, as a whole, booster boxes were just not the right move when it came to Speed Duels. Now then, as for the starter decks, these were significantly better to the booster boxes, but still not great. And realistically, it comes down to the prices of each of these starter decks. Keep in mind, when these starter decks were coming out, they were priced around $10, which doesn't sound that bad. But then you have to also compare this to the fact that when these starter decks were being released, the TCG was also releasing their own structure decks at the same time as well. And I believe during the time that Destiny Masters and Duels of Tomorrow were coming out, the Zombie Horde structure deck was also out, and like a month or two afterwards, the Soulburner structure deck came out at the same time as well. And let's just be real, would you rather pay $10 for a structure deck that essentially gave you a constructed strategy, or would you rather pay for a starter deck that gave you 3 very mediocre decks that were not that fun to play with, if I'm being completely honest? And when you consider that being the dichotomy between it, it makes sense why the starter decks didn't succeed either. Especially when you take into consideration that a lot of the cards being printed in each of those Speed Duel starter decks were probably cards you already owned in your bulk piles as it was. It wasn't until December of 2020 when Konami finally struck gold with their product, releasing the first ever Battle City box. And genuinely, as I said in the beginning, that's one of the greatest products they have ever released in all of Yu-Gi-Oh! And I am not exaggerating when I say this. The Speed Duel boxes was a great direction that Konami decided to take the product in, and genuinely that's one of the best decisions they've made. They offered so much for players of all types. they gave you genuinely good holo printings with rarity upgrades for them that were scattered around each of the boxes, making them fun and interesting to open if you were to buy the sealed product. In addition, these products, priced at around $30, gave you a total of 8 decks plus a miscellaneous pile of cards you could use to go ahead and play with friends and pretty much draft each of these decks. Essentially, that product kind of paid on its own just because of how much value you would get from one singular box, and essentially created a fun and very casual format that embraced the anime and tried making all those strategies viable. Which brings us up to my next point. Konami couldn't seem to embrace what SpeedDuels was supposed to be and didn't pander enough to the anime. Now then, the second big mistake that I believe Konami made with SpeedDuels was not pandering enough to the anime. And I know that sounds like a wild statement, especially when you take into consideration that SpeedDuels is literally based on the anime. But what I mean by this exactly is that I don't think that Konami took the opportunity to truly try and make a lot of these character decks actually viable. One of the main characters that come to mind whenever I talk about this topic is Jaden. And for the most part, Jaden's elemental hero strategy is just hot garbage, especially when you don't take into consideration the Neos deck, which is, it's pretty okay, it's not bad. Being able to summon Neos for free is really cool, and Grandmo is a hell of a card. But I more refer to his actual elemental hero strategy. At one point, there was an okay strategy that was just Blazeman Turbo, which was okay, but it didn't really highlight any of Jaden's iconic elemental hero monsters, which would have been awesome, especially if they had like tailored a skill similar to that to Alexis's Cyber Blader strategy, where it made maybe a card like Flame Wingman actually like a scary boss monster. That could have been really cool. But nevertheless, Jaden never got that. And I can forgive that, especially when you take into consideration that his decks were introduced in the second ever SpeedDuel box, which I guess they were just trying to figure out what they were doing there, which fine, I guess. Nevertheless, Alexis' skill was also printed in that same box, but you know what? I digress. But honestly, I can forgive that in these low quality character decks that we've gotten. But one of my main issues with not pandering enough to the anime is that I think one of the biggest missteps for Konami was the fact that they never took the initiative in trying and print anime exclusive cards for SpeedDuels. Now, my main argument for why this could have realistically possibly happened for SpeedDuels is that it's not unlike Konami to print TCG exclusive archetypes for us in the West. However, I do understand that those archetypes typically do make it into the OCG eventually. But here's the thing, another argument that I do have for that is that skill cards as a whole just do not exist in the OCG. So what keeps Konami from, at least in the TCG, printing exclusive cards for SpeedDuels? And that could have been awesome. They could have explored arcs like Waking the Dragons with characters like Valen and his armor cards. You know how amazing that would have been and how much that would have pushed SpeedDuels as a product? Having cards from the anime, iconic cards of that, being printed there, that would have been amazing, and that would have kept SpeedDuels alive for a lot longer. And especially if we start exploring other characters like Blair Fanigan and her like Maiden in Love strategy, or even her Mystic Dragon strategy later on. Or how about Solomon Moto, Yugi's grandpa, with his ancient deck from the Grand Championship? I feel like as a whole, there were so many characters that they could have explored, and so many interesting and amazing anime cards that we've never gotten into the TCG, especially because they would be power crept for current TCG play, but could be very much viable for SpeedDuel play. And to stay on the topic of the anime as a whole, another big misstep is the fact that I can't believe Konami actually had the gall to say that they were running out of ideas and they were just reprinting cards over and over and over again. And I think that's one of the most laughable statements they had made, because as a whole, there's just so much content that they had left to work with. Only take into consideration the DM era of Yu-Gi-Oh! And the GX era as well. And I remember seeing this all over SpeedDuel Reddit, people just clowning on Konami for saying such a ludicrous idea that they were running out of ideas and cards were just getting printed over and over again. I feel like that says more about Konami and having any lack of imagination, and less about the cards being able to be printed. Even if they didn't want to go ahead and take the path that I illustrated there of printing anime exclusive cards, there are still arcs that you can build upon and do decks around those ideas. And I don't know, for me it just seems like a huge miss from Konami. Hell, I even tried my own attempt in building my own custom SpeedDuel box where I tried exploring the Duelist Kingdom arc. And that was incredibly fun, and I felt like there was so much that could be done with these arcs. But I don't know, that's just me. The last topic I want to go and talk about is poor promotion and coverage of SpeedDuels as a whole. Alright then, and the final and last misstep that Konami had with SpeedDuels as a whole was the egregious lack of promotion and coverage when it came to SpeedDuels. Honestly, it got so bad that I would often not even realize that a big SpeedDuel event was happening somewhere around, because for the most part SpeedDuel events, well, not even for the most part, they were just relegated to side events where not even that many people would be attending to, and I wouldn't even have any idea that they were hosting one. And the thing is, even for these events for SpeedDuels, the coverage was really bad. You couldn't find the breakdown of what decks that participated, you would only ever get the top 4 of that event. And that really sucked. This essentially made SpeedDuels not feel like a real format, just because it just never felt actualized. It honestly got so bad that even whenever we would get a new SpeedDuel ban list, people wouldn't even know. Like, it was genuinely like really bad coverage, and I would have to jump through hoops just to find the new SpeedDuel ban list, and that feels really bad, especially when you take in consideration just how big of a deal a ban list for Master Duel, for Duel Links, for the TCG, OCG, etc., how big ban lists really are, and in SpeedDuels, it's essentially radio silence. But the worst of it all was that even where I live, my local TCG shop would almost never host SpeedDuel events just because most of the people didn't know what SpeedDuels were, essentially reflecting that Konami did a really poor job promoting the product and selling it as an alternative format for people that wanted to play Yu-Gi-Oh! In a much more affordable and a lot more approachable way. And honestly, that's probably the biggest mess up when it came to Konami and SpeedDuels. The fact that they just never really cared if SpeedDuels succeeded or failed. It was just kind of like a whatever thing for them, and that's essentially what it felt like to me. And I'm sure if you're a big fan of SpeedDuels, you probably share the same sentiment as I do, because it really sucks. I feel like SpeedDuels as a whole had a lot going for it, as I said at the beginning. It really does suck that if SpeedDuels were to do anything now, it really just falls on the responsibility of the community as a whole to keep it alive, because Konami pretty much just gave up on it. I know that they said that they're taking a hiatus from it, but honestly, I'm just kind of interpreting that as, yeah, SpeedDuels is technically not dead, but don't hold your breath for us to do anything with it. And you know, I feel like that's even worse, honestly, because if they were planning on doing something else with SpeedDuels, that's awesome, but I don't really think they ever will. And that's a huge shame, because as I said, there's still so much content left when it comes to SpeedDuels that has just been left untapped by Konami. And honestly, I personally want to go ahead and do that by myself. As I said earlier in my video, I did already try and attempt making a SpeedDuel box of my own, and if you're interested in checking it out, I'll leave the link in the description below so you can go ahead and give me your opinions on it. And I hope that in the future I'll be able to do the same thing with a lot of other arcs from the anime as well. I'm currently working on the GX final season box, and that's really been fun to do. So if that sounds like something you'd like to check out on my channel, then consider sticking around and subscribing to the channel. But honestly, those are all my thoughts about what Konami did to essentially let SpeedDuels down as a whole. In the comment section below, let me know, do you share the same sentiment as I do? Do you think I've overblown the effect that Konami had on SpeedDuels as a whole and letting it die? Do you think it was something that was going to happen even if Konami pushed it more? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section below, because I'm very passionate about this. I love SpeedDuels, and I would love to hear where your guys' thoughts are. But with that, I've been Topsy. Thank you so much for stopping by, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Until the next one. Bye.